I'll try not to move.
We'll hook you up with microphones so that everyone can hear you. I'm going to apologize in advance because I have a little frog in my throat. So if I have a little cough, and hopefully I won't hit the water on the table. And before we get started, where is Dr. Bert Davis? He said whoever put the animals on the back screen, he wanted to thank them. Pete and I were trying to figure out which animal we were. So I just wanted to say good afternoon and thank you for having us, Boardstar, to Mary and Bob Uncle and to Lynn Heinberg for inviting us this afternoon. And it's always a great afternoon to be at Marquette on these really spiffy chairs. But it's such a wonderful venue for important conversations. So thank you to Marquette as well for hosting us.
I'd like to second that. And I want to say thanks. I see so many friendly, familiar faces in the audience. It really feels very personal. So thanks for being here. I'm actually going to abuse the personal component and tell a story. I have Mother's Day on my mind, and I suspect there are lots of moms here. And some of you in the audience know the mother of my children, Joan. Joan and I have been married 43 years now. And sometimes people ask me, what is the key to keeping the relationship alive for so many years? And I'm going to share the secret with you. The secret is that Joan and I eat out 4 days a week. We go to very nice restaurants, white tablecloths, proper china, wine. It's expensive, but it's really worth it. Joan goes on Monday and Wednesday, and I go on Tuesday. So with that, I'm going to dive in, and I've prepared some remarks, so I hope you'll bear with me as I look at these pieces of paper. But basically, I want to just open with some background from a board perspective as to why we feel diversity is such an important component of the Greater Milwaukee Foundation. Then Ellen's going to take it from there in terms of how this really works, some of our priorities at the foundation. But I'm just going to lead with the fact that I feel it's almost self-evident how important it is that the efforts in the not-for-profit community reflect the diversity of our community. And I'm sorry to say that Milwaukee doesn't have a particularly strong track record on that front. And in fact, I believe that we continue to be the most segregated community of the largest cities in our country when we're talking about housing. So notwithstanding lots of well-intentioned efforts over the years, we've got a long way to go. And maybe this is overly dramatic, but I think to the extent we fail to do well on the diversity front, what we've seen happen back in the day in Watts, neighborhood of Los Angeles, the kind of violence there, our own near violence during back again in the day when Father Grappi and others were doing the 16th Street Viaduct marches. We certainly didn't do Watts, but there were days when you kind of wondered whether we wouldn't come close. Further afield, the kind of violence that's occurring in the Arab Spring, I think, is a demonstration of the risk that happens when people become so disenfranchised, feeling that they don't have voice, they don't have vote, and resort to violence as maybe their only option. And again, I'm overstating, but we see James Cowley in our Sunday Journal Sentinel regularly brings us examples of exclusion and opportunities to improve right here in our own town. And I'm putting it on the downside about the risks if we don't do better. But there's also the opportunity side. And we need to make our city a much more attractive place for people of color to come career-wise and to raise their families here. And I know back in my days at Northwestern Mutual, to the extent we were out recruiting, we stood a high risk of losing people to Chicago or to Atlanta, people of color, because Milwaukee's reputation on this score, not so good. And this isn't just about not-for-profits. In the profit-making community, or the for-profit community, a lot of our corporate citizens, including my NML friends who are here, NM friends, are making great strides, but we've got to make this happen more broadly, both in the for-profit and the not-for-profit sector. So I thought I'd just begin by sharing some of the motivations at the board level. And I guess the principal one is a desire on our part to lead by example. This predates my joining the board, but the board of the Greater Milwaukee Foundation felt that if we were going to show leadership in this space, we needed to walk our talk. And so we have a bylaw requirement that at least 25% of our board must be persons of color. And we chose persons of color, even though it was before my time and my choosing. Persons of color in our terminology includes African American, Hispanic, Asian, Native American, basically anyone in the census, as defined by the Census Bureau, as non-white. And in making that choice, we did not choose other minority groups, other protected classes. And people sometimes ask, well, why not people with disabilities? Why not some other protected classes? And the answer is that it was our feeling that this area of color is where our community needed to do the most work. So that's what we've done at the board level, and that's the rationale. But that action really is over 10 years old, and it started back in the year 2001 when Doug Jansen, whom many of you will remember, had what is now Ellen's job, and the board chair was a highly regarded person that many of you may know, George Kaiser. And Doug and George started us down this road by participation in a Charles Stewart Mott Foundation program called Lead by Example, which addressed diversity and inclusion in our own setting. Then in 2003 and through 2005, George was succeeded by Linda Mellows, another person whom I suspect many of you know, and all the wonderful things she's done in our community. And under Linda's leadership, we moved into a little deeper dig on segregation, racial discrimination, economic and social disparities. And we joined a cohort of other community foundations to see whether we couldn't get some good thinking, best practices going in that space. So then in 2005, we convened a group, not just of Greater Milwaukee Foundation people, but other people from the community. And as a group, off they went, again, prior to my time, to the Aspen Institute seminar on racial equality and racial, it was called the Aspen Institute Seminar on Racial Equity and Society. And out of the work that was done at that seminar, and again with a broader participation, came something some of you may have participated in, sponsored by the Greater Milwaukee Foundation, called Mosaic, in which we partnered people of a variety of backgrounds in hoping that by getting to know one another at a personal level, bonds would build, it would be easier to break through barriers. And I think the program was very well received and highly regarded. Maybe the most dramatic and to some extent controversial thing in our march down the street has been our current rule around grant making. And we have at the Greater Milwaukee Foundation a protocol that requires that any grantee of our discretionary grants, not donor-advised funds, not supporting orgs, but in our own competitive grant-making activities for our discretionary monies, there must be 10% representation on the board of persons of color. And I guess I want to let you know that we're asking those questions at the front end. And I want you to know that has been an evolutionary process over quite some several years. It began with our simply asking, as part of the grant application process, what your minority board representation is. And we were hoping people would get the hint, but we got no traction. So then we moved to a little more direct, in which we would visibly encourage people, and unfortunately, once again, we didn't get traction. So then we took the next step and said, well, we will consider your grant application and we will vote a grant, but we won't actually fund the grant until we're satisfied that you hit this 10% threshold. And that set up kind of a different set of complications. So now we've moved to where we are now, where this is a question at the front door, and I think maybe Ellen may say more about that in her part. So I just want you to know that is our rule. Those are the reasons for the rule. But I want you to know it's an evolutionary process, and that we did not come to this lightly. But we feel that this is an important issue. We feel we have to be intentional about it, and that's where we are. Maybe you can hear in my voice a little tone maybe of defensiveness. Sometimes this is not without pushback. And people wonder about this in a variety of ways and for a variety of reasons, but I would say the principal one is that people feel like we've established a quota. And lots of people, for good and valid reasons, don't like quotas. I personally, if we're a more perfect world, I don't like quotas myself. But if we're going to get something to change, sometimes you just have to draw a line in the sand, and that's kind of what we've done in this space. So having said that, we want to be helpful in this area. And our own staff and our own board will make efforts to help grant applicants find persons of color to fill out their boards. And we've been happy to do that. We have some, what we think are very good connections, and we've had some wonderful success in that space. And then apropos today's program, which I won't say very much more about because it sounds like you're going to get a demo, but we have helped fund here at Boardstar a process that involves not just a collection of names, but matching and follow-up and some training, some communications, and some software. I mean, part of the software I understand, I haven't seen it, but measures outcomes. So even though we're pretty dug in on this issue, we're all about doing our best, whether directly or through joint work with others, to make this doable and hopefully to improve our town. So with that, I'm going to stop there and turn the mic over to Ellen.
Thanks, Pete. Well, I want to, first of all, applaud a second time our board, both past and present, and my predecessor, Doug Jansen, for their leadership on this really important issue. As we all recognize, our community and our nation is becoming more diverse every moment. And the Greater Milwaukee Foundation is about to release a benchmarking study called Vital Signs with our partners, the United Way and the Faye Macbeth Foundation and the Greater Milwaukee Committee that benchmarks our 4-county region against 16 other regions across the country. And to Pete's point, in terms of racial segregation by residency, we are 16 out of 16. There are some really wonderful things in this benchmarking report that Milwaukee and this region can be very proud of. And stay tuned, because we'll share more of that with you in a few weeks. But these two statistics, I think, are really important for this discussion. One is that we are 16 out of 16 in terms of racial segregation by residency. And the second is that 1 out of every 3 people in this region is a person of color. And there is also a very big age discrepancy. We have one of the oldest white populations among the 16 region cohort, and one of the youngest regions and communities of color. So we have a situation where racial diversity is our present situation, and it is certainly our future. So our opportunity to embrace racial diversity in all its formats is an important opportunity for this community. And I couldn't agree more with Pete's position that this is an opportunity to make this community a more welcoming place, and to attract businesses, and to keep young people who seek out a community that has diversity and inclusion, and where everyone feels welcome. So as a community foundation, we have many donors who have many different interests, and we are intent on following their donor intent. In our 97 years of history, we have generous donors have given the foundation nearly $650 million and 1,100 funds. And so our donors are interested in a whole variety of things, from arts and culture to the environment, to community development, education, health, human services. So we will always be funding organizations and causes that our donors care about through those funds. But they share one thing, and that is a commitment to making this community better. And in that array of resources, many generous donors have left funds that are more unrestricted, that are really at the board's discretion about how they will spend those funds to meet the most pressing community needs currently. So the board has identified 4 areas to really focus the bulk of our resources that are outside of, that are really discretionary, that we have some modeling for, and they are strengthening education, strengthening neighborhoods, improving economic opportunities, and promoting diversity and inclusion. And if you think about it, these 4 areas are really very related, because they are about providing opportunities and better life outcomes for people. So, as many of you may know, and Sarah mentioned, I joined the foundation in 2010 from Cincinnati, from the Greater Cincinnati Foundation. And as some of you may know, Cincinnati erupted in 2001 in 3 days of civil unrest that were the result of very difficult tensions between the African American community and the police department. But really, the issue of police-community interaction was really just the tip of the iceberg. So after that unrest, there was a group that was formed called Cincinnati Can, and it was brought together by the mayor and a religious leader and a business leader from Procter & Gamble. And they involved 1,000 community volunteers from across the community, and their charge was to really make recommendations to the corporate community, to the foundation community, and to city government, how they might reduce disparities around economic opportunity, around education, around a whole variety of issues. So in Milwaukee, we face many of the same issues. So education is clearly an issue where there are racial disparities. The high number of African American males who are incarcerated, unemployment, infant mortality, teen pregnancy, we need to come together as a community to address some of these very pressing issues. And the foundation has begun to take some leadership in that area. Our effort at Milwaukee Succeeds is about every child in every school. We are a partner with the United Way in their teen pregnancy prevention effort. And it's really about producing better outcomes for young women. So we think this issue is very important, and it goes beyond the issue of board leadership and board diversity. And our programmatic activities will reflect this. So with that in mind, our board has made a decision to organize a task force on equity, inclusion, and race, equity, and inclusion. We're just in the process of organizing it, and the purpose of it will be for the task force to really learn from other communities that are addressing these issues and to bring back recommendations to our board for both internal policies and practices and our programmatic activities. And I'm very pleased to say that Janine Geske, the Honorable Janine Geske, Marquette's own distinguished professor of law, who is a member of GMF's board, has agreed to chair this task force for us. So that will be in formation probably in the fall, and so we will be moving forward on that. Obviously, we can't do this work alone. We are already in partnership with many people in this room and with other funders and community leaders across the country. Well, we'd like to be involved, leaders across the country on this, but in this community to try and advance this work. So we're very interested in engaging in dialogue with you about this and to hear your ideas about how we might advance better outcomes for all people in this community and really begin to address some of the racial disparities that really affect so many people in our region. So I think we're ready to take some questions.
All right. We welcome them. While you're thinking, I'm going to publicly thank Ellen when she was in that part about kind of the demographic changes in our community for not looking directly at me and saying old white guys. Well, if there aren't any, I think there's a video. Okay.
Peter, you had alluded that the foundation had helped or was positioned to perhaps help organizations looking to increase diversity at their board level.
Yes.
Can you speak or perhaps Ellen to that?
Well, maybe this is all too direct and personal, but we, the African American contingent on our board, and in particular Jackie Hurd Barber, has made a personal commitment to help anyone who approaches us and asks to find an appropriate fit.
And then our grant to Boardstar is exactly focused on that.
Yes, sir.
I mean, the fact that we're 16 out of 16 didn't happen overnight. I mean,
Right.
This has been a characteristic, I guess, that has existed and has probably gotten worse over the years. What do you see as the biggest barriers for us to advance in this area? Or causes?
Well, I think, so at least my experience in Cincinnati, we had a lot of people come to help us think through these issues when things erupted in Cincinnati. And I remember one person who was a national leader in this area said, you know, the police community relations are a symptom. They are not a cause. And so the symptom was around the issues of disparities in education and health outcomes and employment and other opportunities that hold people back. So my sense is, and this is why we're focused on education as one of, if not the biggest lever for change and individual opportunity. I absolutely believe that education can make a significant difference in people's lives. It's been demonstrated for many generations. So if we begin to address some of the disparities around economic opportunity and educational opportunity and health outcomes and other things, I think that we will begin to address some of the underlying issues. Cincinnati is a highly segregated city by residents as well, not quite as much as Milwaukee, but it's very highly segregated. I think it's partially due to good Midwestern people who grow up in a neighborhood. They don't leave a neighborhood. There isn't a lot of in-migration necessarily. I mean, we're not on the coast. People don't move. They're not constantly moving in and out of a community. So I know that in Cincinnati, people lived in a neighborhood. They often moved into their parents' houses. They went to the same church, the same school. So it's not it is what it is, and it's a very difficult thing to change, but it's not alone. But I'm more concerned about the disparities.
I could give a very similar answer, Francis, but I think a big part of the underlying issue is the loss of good manufacturing jobs in our town, and the fact that with that goes employment opportunities, economic opportunities. So the polarization that Ellen referred to has a big fundamental economic at its base that makes it difficult for people to move into neighborhoods. Successful people tend currently to move out. But without jobs, and I think that is one of the reasons I personally am excited that we have an education, and our top two priorities are education and job growth, economic development. I think that's what's underneath this. I think a lot of this is not ill will. I think we've come to where we are all in good faith, but some very difficult dynamics. Wait back.
I'm sorry, I have to address a really touchy subject. The concern that I have are high areas of concentrated poverty within the central city, and that's one of the major factors contributing to a lot of the disparities around health, education, and even food deserts. When you talk about people having access to food in their own community, these are things that people have not had access to for many, many years, and that's systematic. How does that change? I mean, it's one thing for you to say that you want, inclusion and diversity, but it's another thing to live that.
Right.
I mean, even the individuals, presenting the information don't look like the individuals who are living in these areas, that are being sought out.
I think that's much better said than my words and Ellen's about jobs, economic opportunity. I think you put your finger exactly on the very fundamental problem, poverty, and how to break through it. Yes, sir.
How far are you guys really out into it? And when you say diversity and inclusion, you talk about like residency issues and opportunities, educational gaps. So you look at our organizations that are Milwaukee-based. Some of our organizations face the same issues in terms of disparity between their workers of color and the workers of non-color. You look at maybe the executive rates, the management rates. There's a disparity there. So I wonder if you could kind of leverage some of the things that they're doing to address those disparities, maybe partner with them to maybe find solutions that can benefit the community as a whole as well.
So I think that's a great idea. I mean, I think as Pete mentioned in his comments, I mean, I think that in some ways the corporate sector has advanced a little bit because of recruitment and retention issues. And so we hope to look to them for some examples.
We could do one more. No? One more.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So I'm going to try to echo the voice that just came before mine, and I want to try to bring it back to the study of vital signs that you guys are going to be doing. I'm hoping that along with the benchmarking that you're going to be conducting, and I'm a data hound also, but are you anticipate that you're going to produce some innovative measures that have kind of with the best practices in Cincinnati and other places? Because I think what they're saying is that in certain realms, this information that you're going to gather is not new.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, especially those people who live it.
Right.
And so the reality is, we're going to need to have some concrete solutions or recommendations, because the presentation of the information by itself is going to be enlightening to many, and it's just going to be a reiteration to others. And secondarily, I'm on the GMC as you are, and the Diversity and Inclusion Committee was trying to attack this, and we actually had to change our name because of the pushback we were getting. So I think the areas of concentration and focus are going to have to be on those individual stakeholders in the community who can make the change, because the people who are living this can't make the change by themselves. So the individuals who can make the change are going to be the ones that have to be invested in this, or you're going to be just spinning your work.
So let me just clarify that the Vital Signs benchmarking project is 80 indicators that relate to a whole quality of life indicators that are very broad. I just picked out those two because they were pertinent for this conversation. But to your second point about what are we going to do about it, is the reason that we are forming this task force to help not only advance our thinking so that we can learn from other communities that have addressed these issues, so that we can have a broad-based committee that would include other funders and other community leaders, so that we're just, the Greater Milwaukee Foundation, as big and bad as it is not going to advance this whole effort on our own. So we have to form partnerships and involve more people if we're really going to make progress on this.
Great. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.